Welcome to the Blockchain Blueprint. It is my pleasure, and it's a very personal privilege to have this man speak with us today, because just before I pressed record, I've been telling him just how much I've been following the Trends Journal and his Trends in the News that I've been following almost daily. So thank you, Mr. Gerald Celente, for joining me today.
And thank you so much for having me.
So I'll give you a little brief intro. So Gerald is the world's leading trend forecaster, and he runs his magazine, the Trends Journal, since 1980. He has a daily Trends in the News broadcast online on their website, where they proudly boast of having tomorrow's news today. He's also been able to forecast 9/11 in his book Trends 2000, the rise of fast, healthy, clean foods, the Wall Street panic in 1987, amongst many, many other different things. So can you give us a bit more background into yourself and how you established the Trends Journal into what it is today?
Well, out of graduate school, I began working on political campaigns in New York. And I was the #2 guy running the mayoral campaign in Yonkers, which is quite a big city, and in Westchester County, which was the richest county in America at the time. And then they sent me up to Albany, and I became the assistant to the secretary of the New York State Senate, and went on to teach. It's a course I designed at St. John's University, American Politics and Campaign Technology. From there, I went on to Washington, D.C., and I was the chief government affairs specialist for the chemical industry, a big division of it. And I got to see the inside out. There's a photo of me over there with Ronald Reagan when I was 30 years old, and we hired him to speak to our group. This is 2 days before he's announcing that he's running against Gerald Ford. So I've been with presidents and princes and prime ministers, and so I've seen what it looks like. And I became a political atheist, realizing how corrupt political systems are. And I realized that current events form future trends. And if you could look at the world the way it is and not the way you want it to be, or lock yourself into any ideology, you could get a pretty good grasp of what the future will bring. And you have to look at it in what I call a global-nomic perspective, and that means making connections between different fields. So economists, for example, they're well-trained and well-read and well-bred in economics, but they don't look a lot at geopolitics and social change, environmental, etc. So my system is making connections between different fields, and I realized when I started doing it that no one else was really doing it. There was a big book out. It was called Megatrends by John Nesbitt. And my book, Trend Tracking, came out shortly after that. In Time magazine's quote is, Trend Tracking, the name of my book, far better than Megatrends. So in developing the magazine and putting out information continually based on the current events forming future trends, that was the beginning of the development of both the Trends Research Institute and the Trends Journal magazine.
And so from that, in terms of how you were able to pick up on trends, because it's one thing being a trendsetter, but being able to catch it as well is almost just as important. Would you say?
Yes. Well, what happened was, actually, I mentioned I was in D.C. and the Iranian conflict was breaking out, and I had known, about America's overthrow of Mossadegh in 1953 with the MI6 and the CIA, and how he had the nerve to nationalize the Iranian oil that was formerly called Anglo-Iranian oil and Standard Oil. They controlled the Iranian oil fields. Standard Oil, of course, better known today as ExxonMobil, and Anglo-Iranian, better known as BP. So when he threw them out and said, no, the oil belongs to the Iranian people, the American government and the UK government overthrew the democratically elected government of Mossadegh and brought in a brutal dictator, the Shah. And I remember reading again, through the years about the Savak, the secret police, and how brutal they were, and all the people that rebelled against the Shah, how tortured they were and killed, so many of them. So when the revolution began to break out in the 1970s, I knew it was real. When I saw millions of people taking to the streets, I said, this thing's going to continue. And Jimmy Carter was president at the time and went to visit the Shah, he and Rosalind, on New Year's Eve. And in those days, when the president came back from an overseas trip, it was a big deal. Come down the helicopter and salute, stand in front of the microphones. And he announced to the American people that the Shah was the island of stability in the Middle East. And at that moment, I became a political atheist. I knew this thing was going to be overthrown. I saw the nationalism and anti-Iran movement building in America. And I just said to myself, what will be the implications? And I realized that oil prices would go up and gold prices would go up. So I started speculating in gold and oil futures. And that's how I was able to leave my job. I made enough money in doing that and understanding that the implications of your events and what you do, just in your personal life, the same thing on a national and global scene. You know, the actions bring results, negative and positive. So I just looked at the actions, the current events, and saw how they were going to play out. And by the way, in 2017, the report came out that was finally allowed for we, the stupid little ignorant, low-life people, are allowed to see when the government allows you to see it, showed this CIA report of what happened with the overthrow of Mossadegh. And words from Winston Churchill, how we need that Iranian energy. We have to take that oil. So, but that didn't make any of the American news media, and, you know, that we have Stormy Daniels and other more important things to talk about over here.
Of course. So following on from how you kind of came to this point, from when you started the Trends Journal up until this point, has your method in terms of research and then collecting data, tell me, how much does data in terms of number play a part in forming a trend and coming to the conclusion of a particular trend?
Mostly total, but it's not hard data. It's also qualitative and quantitative. You know, I get delivered each day. I get the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Times, just in hard newspapers. And what I do is, as you see with this, the yellow, or with this, the yellow, or the story here from the IFO Institute, expects cool down in German economy. What I do is I highlight the important parts of a story. So here's one: U.S. home builders stocks under pressure as interest rates rise. So you can see I'll outline a whole story. I have to read it to the end. And I'm looking for data and information. And then going to all different kinds of sites, from the World Socialist website, to Fars News Agency in Iran, to Al Jazeera, to People's Daily in China, China Daily, and you name the country, and I'm looking at their information that they're putting out to get everybody's viewpoints and what's going on, and trying to collect as much data and information as I can. I mentioned the New York Times. They call it themselves the paper of record. Well, it's degraded to me to be the toilet paper of record. I don't learn anything from it anymore because they write stories with opinions in them and on information that's not going to show me what's going on in the world and how it's going to affect trends at different levels. But I read it just to also look at it to see how uninformed so many people are by relying on these kind of news sources and seeing what they're pushing forward and what people are really missing. So I just look at as much information as I can. It's a daily exercise, and I've been doing it now for almost 40 years.
So let's talk about blockchain at this point, because it's a very hot trend, not just for this year, but also for next year as well. Did your interest in blockchain technology stem just from the rise in cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin?
No. I started reading about it before Bitcoin and simultaneously. I would say simultaneously, because it really started making the news around the same time. But we've been writing about it in both different aspects. And as you may know, one of my top trends that I would love to see developed is called blockchain democracy. And when you go and look at one of the most successful, richest countries in the world that haven't been in a war since the 1850s and been surrounded by it many times, it's Switzerland. They have direct democracy. The people vote on the issues, the major issues. People don't know who the president of Switzerland is. It doesn't count. The people count. So people say to me, well, that's a small country. So what? It's one issue, whether one person votes on it or 110 million people vote on it or 11 million people
It just
vote
has
on
so
it.
happened to be the richest country in the world. And
One of the richest, yeah. And the blockchain democracy will allow that to happen. We don't have representative form of governments. When are people going to grow up about this? The people in government represent themselves. And the people that give them money, they pay them off. And imbeciles and morons call campaign contributions. And anybody with a half a brain calls payoffs. I mean, that's all they are. So we don't have a representative form of government here. We have people that have been paid off by their corporate johns to put out. And so they're nothing more than politicians and prostitutes. So direct democracy is built upon blockchain democracy. We just had an election in the United States. What a joke for the whole world to see. Took 2 weeks to count votes using a paper ballot system that's antiquated, wait online, old systems breaking down, voting systems breaking down. You know, why can't we have blockchain voting? I mean, if I could transfer a bank or companies could transfer billions of dollars in milliseconds, you mean we can't block our vote and have it to be a real vote? So blockchain is definitely the future. However, the establishment is going to do everything they can to use it to their advantage. And when it's to their disadvantage, they'll do everything they can to stop it.
So you've just touched on because in the last issue you had on the front cover, blockchain democracy, but then you've also had a trend whereby there'll come a time where people can vote from the comfort of their own couch or something. How far away would you say we are from such a thing? Do you think this could happen in the next 5-10 years from now?
It's we ended our story by saying what's stopping it is the will of the people. And so it's going to take the will of the people. And right now we don't see that. And it's anathema to all the political systems because they want to control the voting system so they could rig it the way they want. I mean, how much more proof do people need in their own countries to see how the systems are rigged? So it's going to be a fight against the people, against the establishment. And right now we don't see that happening. Not in America anyway.
Because I've seen in Eastern Europe, in places like Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania, for instance, they've really taken blockchain to their, they're so advanced with it, far more than, say, America is.
Oh, America's way behind the curve. Well, again, all you have to do is look at the last elections. It was a joke. It was a sick joke. People counting hundreds of thousands of ballots by hand. Couldn't figure out who won until 2 weeks later in many places. All kinds of breakdowns, voter fraud. It's a disgrace. This isn't a democracy anymore. And democracy's dead in America. A paisano of mine had the right definition for it, the merger of state and corporate powers. Mussolini called it fascism. And he was a champ at it, and he knows what it is and knows what it looked like, and that's what you have over here. In China, you have an inside-out government. The government runs the country. They run the businesses. State SOEs, state-operated enterprises. You have a big chunk of a lot of the companies out there. They dictate from within the Communist Party how the country is going to develop. In America, you have an outside-in government. The government doesn't count at all. The outside interests tell the politicians what they should do and how they should do it. So it's not in their interest to have blockchain democracy. It's not in their interest to have blockchain voting. It's in their interest to control the people as much as they can in any way that they can. And by their deeds, you shall know them. Because since the Panic of '08 happened, 95% of the wealth created in America has gone to the 1%. Trump's tax cuts, 82% gone to the 1%. Most of the tax cuts have gone into stock buybacks. They're at over $1 trillion this year. And I'm not making those numbers up. Those are real hard numbers. On the 82%, that's from the Tax Policy Center. And on the $1 billion plus buybacks, that's general knowledge. So it's not going to enrich the people. So it's the corporate interests. When you look at wages, you have 39% of American people, 39% cannot pay $1,000 if they had their car breakdown or a medical emergency. So they don't want to give control to the people. And what blockchain does in many ways, it gives it back to the people.
How much upside do you think blockchain has in terms of a trend? Is it a case of it being the sky being the limit?
Well, trends are born, they grow, they mature, reach old age, and die. Blockchain has just been born. And just as a child, an infant is born, and it keeps taking on different features as it grows from infancy to childhood, to puberty, to adulthood, to aging, it keeps changing. So blockchain's still in its infancy. So it has a long way to go as we see it.
Mm. And as the global markets seem to fall like a house of cards, well, not just the global economy, just the whole, the whole show, basically. What do you think that banks and institutions in the establishment will launch their own cryptocurrencies? Because for me, it's all very well having Bitcoin and Ethereum and so on. But in my mind, I keep thinking, what's stopping these banks and governments launching their own government coin that they could control? If you don't, they could just say, well, if we don't like you, we can, freeze you out.
I believe it will happen. And it's the future. Because when you look at one of our top trends is two of them. One is, blessed are the geeks. And there's a quote from the King James Bible that says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And we say King James spelled it wrong. It's blessed are the geeks, they have inherited the earth. So what we're saying is we're going into a world of artificial intelligence. So cryptocurrencies, artificial currencies are all part of that. And then the new generation, we have Generation Z equals Generation Zero in so many different ways, in that they're more comfortable in the digital world than in the human world. They'd rather interact on social media than socially together by so many numbers that are being shown. So they're growing up with this. This is the only life they know. You go out and you see parents sitting at a restaurant table and an infant staring at a screen and knowing how to play with the thing. So a cryptocurrency issued by banks or other institutions and nations, it's just going to be a natural evolution of the 21st century. It's a new millennium. It's a different time, a different place, and different currencies.
Mm. And do you think blockchain has the power to change the world in much the same way as the internet or email did, say, in 1995 or 1996?
Of course. And that's what we're saying, that blockchain democracy could change the world. It puts the power back in the hands of the people. And people say to me, well, the people are ill-informed. They don't know what to do. You're going to trust them? And I say to them, well, who are you going to trust? You're going to trust Macron? You're going to trust May? You're going to trust Trump? You're going to trust Clinton or Obama or Bush or Sarkozy or Cameron? Who are you going to trust? How can you trust these people? Can't you think for yourself? You want them to decide for you? I wasn't put on this earth to take orders from people. I know enough. I can make my own decisions. So it's not like they're doing such a great job out there. As we see, again, in our top trends for 2019, I say my 38 years of doing this, I've never seen so much geopolitical and economic uncertainty that could devolve into something very catastrophic in a number of ways. It's a rocky road ahead.
Yeah.
So they're not doing a great job at it. Continual war, continual hatred, and continual, as you pointed out, a slowdown of global economies.
Mm. But if there is so much global uncertainty, and why do you think there's just so much blind faith from the general public in these leaders who don't know what they're doing?
Because they don't have the faith in themselves, they don't have the courage, and they've been brainwashed since infancy with the education systems. And that's what really, they're brainwashing schools. They're not education. You learn how to talk and think. One of our top trends for 2019 is America, Puritan 2.0, how you have to be so politically correct. But wage wars, slaughter millions of people, spend trillions of dollars doing it, not even an issue in the midterm elections. So people don't care about that. They're brainwashed on identity issues. So they're missing the big picture. And that's why I said to you, in America, I don't see blockchain democracy happening. It could happen in Belgium. It could happen in the Netherlands. It could happen in France. May even happen in Italy. But we just saw the Italian, the Lega and Cinque Stelle, the two anti-establishment movements, sell out. They were going to raise the debt level so they could give the Italian people more money because they're in such dire straits. And Brussels said no, and they backed off. So again, politicians getting into office and lying to the people. They lie their way into office. You know, I tell people to Google up the definition of politician. Just go to Google and put in definition of politician. Oh, a person that runs, for political office, blah, 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 blah. A person that's manipulative and devious, typically to gain advancement within an organization. That's the definition. So who's your favorite manipulative and devious person? So until the people take the courage back into their own lives, I don't see the changes happening.
But with Brexit imminent over here in the UK, do you think that represents an opportunity, particularly for startup businesses?
Yes, but look at the difficulties with Brexit. The people voted for it, and they're telling the people, go screw yourself. Just like they did in Greece, when the people voted against the IMF austerity measures. And that little low-life prime minister over there told the people to go screw themselves. I'm going to do it anyway. I could care less what you want. And that's what the politicians are doing. Brexit should have happened a long time ago. And now they're calling for another vote. And again, world trade and globalization, it's destroyed the people. I just read an article about the UK. The numbers were phenomenal on how much the purchasing power and income of the average person declined since the Great Recession. And the difficulties so many people are having, the same thing with France, with the yellow vest movement. It's about the inequality. So, but they don't care. The politicians don't care. They don't care what the people want. And the police forces are nothing more than gangs to keep the politicians in office. And they forget that they're the regular people, and they beat up the people and push them down and put them back in their place. So we are, in many ways, you could start looking at this as the 1930s, when you start seeing nationalist movements, you start seeing big labor movements, anti-establishment movements. And then when the powers to be start losing their power and all else fails, they take you to war.
And how do you think startup businesses can benefit from using blockchain technology in their business? It doesn't have to be financial necessarily. It could be just about anything.
Well, it is, again, about anything. You read about places like Walmart. They'll tell you where those bananas came from, when they were picked, and who picked them. So if you have a problem with them, they go right back to where they got them from. So blockchain has so many avenues of opportunity that have yet to been opened. Again, it's a brand new trend, and it will begin to help everyone as the technology advances, becomes more usable, applicable in so many different ways, overtaking other systems. You mentioned the internet. And I remember it very well when it began. That's why we own so many great domain names like trendsjournal.com, trendsresearch.com, trendalert.com. I could never get these things now. You saw it happening in the beginning. It was the birth of it. I remember when you used to go on and you saw these staccato movements You couldn't see a moving picture. And look how it's developed. And it's the same thing with blockchain. Again, it's only in its early stages, and the people that seize upon it now are seizing upon one of the biggest on-trendpreneur opportunities that exist in the 21st century at this point.
I think with blockchain, and I'm going to try and be as unbiased as I can with this, you know, for me, this is the biggest trend in the last 20 or so years, for me personally. And so, do you feel that, you know, videos such as these, as for people who watch them, you know, these are very much on trend that for those who wish to embrace this new age of technology? Because for me, this is almost like Web 3.0, forget 2.0.
Well, you're right. It is a 3.0 in some senses, but remember, we're only in, you know, the first 18 years of the 21st century. So let's go back to the 20th century and go into the first 18 years. How many automobiles were there around? They were still fighting World War I on horseback, and guys running between trenches, and hardly any airplanes. People were still getting the Iceman delivering the ice before refrigeration. And then by the end of the 20th century, it was a whole new world. So again, we're just at the beginning of this as we see it. And for the people that really want to learn about it, you asked me about trends. I never stopped studying about it. So we write one of our top trends this year is getting high and getting healthy, meaning that the whole marijuana and cannabis and hemp businesses are going to explode. And that the people that want to take advantage of it, you have to learn about it from the beginning if you really want to seize the opportunities at their greatest level. And again, this is a trend we've been writing about now for some 3 years. And we saw it coming, and we wrote about it. And now it's coming worldwide. It's brand new. It's like looking at the end of Prohibition in America in the 1930s. It grew from there. But when it happened in 1933, you know, people were just jumping on board to make things. That's the same thing with this. It's the same with cannabis and hemp. And it's the same thing as we see it with blockchain technology.
Brilliant. Is there anything else you wish to add at all that we may not have touched upon?
Other than the economy, which we see as an economic 9/11 with a $250 trillion debt bubble ready to explode. And this day that we're talking is the day that the Federal Reserve in the United States is going to decide whether or not to raise interest rates. And it appears that they will be. But we are forecasting they're going to slow their aggressive interest rate policies in 2019 and shoot up more monetary meth into that bull to keep it running. And so our economic 9/11 trend forecast is going to be somewhat restrained until that bull eventually ODs. But the Federal Reserve has more power now because they've raised interest rates, and they'll be up to like a overnight rate of 2.25 to 2.50. That'll allow them to bring rates down throughout next year if they have to. And that, again, will put more cheap money into the system and artificially inflate the equity markets, but do nothing to build the global economy.
But surely this can't go on for very much longer, can it?
One of the mistakes I've made in my forecasts is underestimating the ability for them to come up with new schemes. So, for example, as you mentioned, I had forecast the panic of '08. I took out the domain name in 2007. I thought by 2012 we'd go into a severe depression. We didn't. I had no idea about quantitative easing, zero and negative interest rate policy. They didn't teach me that in Economics 101 at graduate school. They make up stuff. So how we're talking negative interest rates in Europe, negative interest rates in Japan, negative interest rates in parts of Europe, other parts of Europe besides the ECB. You're looking at quantitative easing still going on in China, in Japan, excuse me. And despite them having again, third quarter negative GDP rate at 2.5%, So they make up these new scams to keep the money junkies going. And just like any desperate addict will do anything to keep getting an injection to keep them going, they'll do the same thing. They're money addicts.
Precisely. And what words of advice would you pass on for a person in a startup that wants to use blockchain technology? What would your words of wisdom be?
I don't think I know enough right now to give that kind of advice to an entrepreneur. Because right now, as you well know, it's being used mostly by the bigger corporations and bigger financial institutions.
Absolutely.
I don't know, how it's going to be implemented on a smaller level. However, I see it going very deeply into the health field as well. And that's not talked a lot about right now. It's talked about a bit, but mostly financial and major corporate. So I think health is going to be the next big area it moves into.
Fantastic. Finally, if people want to get in touch with you or know more about you, where should they go?
Well, our website is trendsresearch.com, trendsresearch.com. And of course, to subscribe to the Trends Journal, guaranteed, the only magazine where you'll read history before it happens, is trendsjournal.com. And it's only $129 a year. It's a monthly. We put out trend alerts each week. And as you mentioned, we do Trends in the News broadcasts Monday through Thursday. And we're always putting out more and more information. It's not just information that you read, you read and learn. And we give strategic plans, forecasts, and analysis that you won't find anywhere else. Money back guarantee.
Gerald, it was absolutely an education. Thank you so much. Because when I watch your YouTube channel, I sometimes read comments below on the Trends in the News saying classes in session. Today was absolutely one of those days. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Mr. Gerald Celente.
And thank you for all that you're doing.